There are now 30 full-length Halo novels, with 2 more on the way, and in my experience, trying to find recommendations on which to read can be a bit challenging. Is this book any good? Will it be interesting for me who mainly has an interest in a certain part of the Halo story? What characters appear, and how can I know that without spoilers? Welcome back to my series where I give mini reviews on each of these novels in release order, highlighting the plot setup, links to other Halo media, as well as my general opinion on my enjoyment of the books. This will be my 5th and final video in the series, reviewing the 5 novels released between 2019 and 2022. All but one of the novels in this video are sequels to novels I covered in my previous 2 videos, so at the very least I recommend watching parts 3 and 4 first, unless you're only here to hear about Halo the Rubicon Protocol. That also means there will be some minor spoilers for the books as I'm going into my plot setups for each of the books, so beware of that. Particularly for a reveal in Halo Renegades when I'm talking about Point of Light, but even that reveal is relatively well known. Without any more delay, let's get into the first of 5 books. A few weeks after Operation Silent Storm near the start of the Human Covenant War, Spartan Blue Team, made up of Master Chief John 117, Fred 104, Linda 087, and Kelly 058, is sent on another mission, this time to the planet Netherop to capture a disabled Covenant ship called the Steadfast Strike. Though there are some UNSC forces deployed with Blue Team on the planet, help from regular humans won't be so effective. Netherop's atmosphere is scorching hot and uninhabitable, so the Spartans must make do mostly on their own, and if any survivability systems go awry in their Mjolnir power armor, they're done for. With Nizat Kavarosi leading the Silent Shadow, a group of Special Forces elites now no longer part of the Covenant, doing his best to ensure the demons die trying to complete their mission, Blue Team needs to complete the mission, extending dozens of kilometers through treacherous and uninhabitable terrain by foot. Very quickly, Blue Team finds useful ancient technology that can help transport them across vast stretches of land, and the only ones around who know how to control it are human inhabitants they found on this scorching planet. I have to put it bluntly, I did not like this book very much. It feels astoundingly like Silent Storm, a book I felt was already retreading old ground. So having a book that has the Spartan 2s on a far less interesting mission, walking and walking and walking for a large chunk of the book, and having a small cast with little character development and less world building is just boring. In Silent Storm, at least you had the return of many old Spartans, some galactic politics, character cameos, and a mix of ground and space combat. Here, you've got a long walk that basically lasts the whole book, with the occasional ground firefight. I thought this was going to set up the Silent Shadow characters who are with the Banished in Halo Infinite, such as Jaga Radamnai, but I don't believe there are any common characters. I also thought the plotline about human survivors who had been stuck on the planet for multiple generations would be interesting, but its emotional impact on the Spartans fades after their first meeting, so you get stuck with boring descriptions of the terrain for most of the book, which Troy Denning loves to write about. If there was a paint-by-numbers Halo book, it's this one. You get a few Spartans acting stoic, a bunch of gunfights that have no stakes because we all know the main characters live into the later books in Halo 5, and some elites babbling about honor and being angry to fill up the page count. I don't know how to put it elegantly, just don't read Oblivion unless you want to read absolutely every Halo book. I'd even recommend Legacy of Onyx over this one because even though I didn't like that one, at least it was interesting to talk about. So skip it, but don't let that make you think I dislike all of Troy Denning's work. It felt like Troy Denning's Master Chief trilogy finally had a purpose when I saw that its final entry, Shadows of Reach, was Blue Team's return to Reach in 2559 on a mission to retrieve an asset that would help quell Cortana's threat looming over the galaxy. When they get there along with the UNSC Infinity, Reach is this desolate wasteland after the Covenant glassed it in 2552. The terrain is difficult to navigate, dangerous chemicals are everywhere, and to top it off, the Banished are here with their second-in-command Escharum looking for something too. So the mission is, bring excavation equipment across Reach to the former location of Castle Base, where Blue Team rescued Halsey from in 2552, and retrieve the asset from underground. That mission gets complicated when Blue Team finds a militia of human survivors living in the caves made by the rapid cooling of Reach's surface after the glassing. The militia are here trying to rebuild Reach to its former glory, they're furious the Banished are here, and they're ready to launch a big strike that could alert Cortana to activity on Reach, where she could send a Guardian. As we've seen in Halo 5 and in Bad Blood, a Guardian is no joke. It could show up, deploy forces everywhere, and disable all electronics, including the UNSC Infinity housing Lasky, Palmer, and Halsey up in orbit. And if the Infinity makes too much noise or gets spotted by a Guardian, it is over for humanity's resistance against Cortana. And did I mention Escherum's here, but a bit busy at the moment doing higher level work. So the leader of a recently recruited faction is in charge of stopping the Spartans. That leader is the just as cunning and, in my opinion, much more interesting Castor, the leader of the Keepers of One Freedom, and he's been sent aid by Atriox in the form of Insulin Gatagai, a former Sangheili Blade Master of the Silent Shadow, and no, he does not appear in Halo Oblivion or Silent Storm. So Blue Team needs to make it to Castle Base while escorting heavy excavation equipment, remain undetected by the Banished, including Castor and Gatagai, and stop the local militia from nuking the Banished, which would bring Guardians into orbit in a heartbeat. Now, having read this book, I still don't see the purpose in the previous two. It makes some passing references to Silent Storm and Oblivion, but nothing more. The book feels like it follows the same plot structure and writing style as Oblivion, except this one is far more interesting because the plot is actually doing something for the greater Halo universe. That said, it is a decent read. It introduces Escharum before his big battles in Halo Infinite, and he talks and brags far less here, which I like. But he's not the main villain. Castor is, the main villain of Halo Retribution, the second entry of Troy Denning's other Halo novel trilogy. And in their fight, you see Blue Team isn't as invincible as they once were. They're getting old, so they can't avoid enemy shots as often, lift huge weights, or generally accomplish the same old incredible feats. The invincible, legendary Spartan 2s of the Human Covenant War are gone now. Blue Team, although just as smart as before, need to take it slower and much more tactically now, which makes Master Chief's loss to Atriox at the start of Halo Infinite much more understandable. With that, I liked Shadows of Reach. It has much better stakes than Oblivion, the slow pace adds to Blue Team's aging capabilities, and the supporting cast of Castor, Gatagai, Escharum, Halsey, and Lasky are great. And Halsey's internal monologue and justification for the Spartan program from Glasslands continues here too. But I don't think you need to read Silent Storm or Oblivion at all to get it. If you'd like to get a good picture of what the universe is like after Halo 5 and just before the start of Halo Infinite, or want more Blue Team or Castor, read this one. Throw in Bad Blood and the Rubicon Protocol if you want the fuller picture of the gap between Halo 5 and Halo Infinite. Again, overall, I say yay to this book. However, be warned that Troy Denning's writing style is just as slow here as in Oblivion and Silent Storm. I think it works better in this book because of the Spartans being older, but just know that he likes to describe the terrain a lot. Halo Point of Light, not to be confused with Halo Last Light from 2015, is the third book in the trilogy following Ryan Forge in her quest to track down the Spirit of Fire and her father, John Forge. We all know the catch about finding Sergeant Forge after he sacrificed himself in the ending of Halo Wars, and by the end of the previous book, Renegades, it was time for Ryan to learn it too. Her powerful robotic companion, 343 Guilty Spark, tells her and her crew the bad news, and Ryan is now a bit lost for purpose. Of course, she's upset and hurt, but she made a deal with Spark. He helps her find her father, and she helps him search for his old mentor, the Librarian, who disappeared and probably died 100,000 years ago with the firing of the Halo array. But Spark has reason to believe she's alive, and insists on finding her. As we can see on the front cover, Zeta Halo, or Installation 07, is the first stop in their hunt, and it's just as creepy and filled with mystery as it was in Primordium. When I went in after reading Renegades, I was expecting the end of Ryan Forge's journey, but instead I got a conclusion to 343 Guilty Spark's character, and an even more complete conclusion for the Librarian, and I'm happy with how they end. Because of that, I do hope this is the last we see of the Librarian and Spark, but I would not be surprised if we saw Ryan again soon. I like this book. You may have picked up by now that I tend to like the books with complicated arguments between the characters and not a lot of combat. Point of Light doesn't have a lot of combat, but neither does it have a complicated argument. It's very different from Renegades in that it's about finding closure in a much more relaxed way than before. The dust has settled, and it's time to figure out how to move on, and Kelly Gay treats that with much less tension and more respect than she did in Renegades. But that's okay, because the book has different goals than Renegades did. Even with the lack of that tension, we get some interesting settings with Zeta Halo, Ryan's family home, and the Hannibal Research Center. We also have the great cast of characters from the previous two books and a satisfying conclusion to the stories of two long-running Halo characters. I recommend this to anyone who wants to continue Ryan's journey from Smoke and Shadow and Renegades, wants the conclusion of Spark's arc from Primordium and Renegades, or wants the conclusion to the Librarian story from Halo Silentium. Because it's the end of a trilogy, I can't imagine it being a great standalone read, so if you really want to read it, get to Renegades and maybe Silentium at the very least, though I could definitely understand you skipping Primordium because of how boring it can be. I also need to mention that this book came out in March 2021, about 9 months before Halo Infinite's campaign released, and it has Zeta Halo as a significant location in it. Whether it's a good or bad thing, I don't think this book is concerned with setting up Infinite at all. That may be because Halo Infinite was originally supposed to release in the fall of 2020, where Shadows of Reach would be the last book released before it, which would make a bit more sense in terms of plot setup. Anyway, Ryan and crew do go to Zeta Halo, but they quickly leave. And the only part of this book in common with Infinite's plot and setting is that the monitor from the game, Despondent Pyre, is mentioned in this book, but doesn't show up. If I were to guess, we may get more common threads between the books we've seen Zeta Halo in, like Primordium, Hunters in the Dark, and Point of Light, in Halo Infinite's potential campaign expansions if they ever come, but I'd expect those common threads to come from Primordium, where the entire book takes place on the ring compared to the other two books, where it's only a stop in the journey. In Halo Divine Wind, Veda Lopez and her squad of Oni ferrets, Spartan 3's Ash, Olivia, and Mark, have been undercover for 2 years trying to take out Castor and his Keepers of One Freedom from the inside. Pretending to be followers of their Covenant-like faith, yes, this ex-Covenant faction accepts anyone who is faithful, even humans. The ferrets helped Castor steal a banished Lich, kidnap the Sangheili Blade Master, Insulin Gadagai, and make their way from Reach to the Ark to finish what the Covenant couldn't, the Great Journey. When they arrive on the Ark, things are a lot more chaotic than expected. Castor and his Keepers are immediately contacted by the Banished, wondering why they have that Lich and why it's been returned to the Ark. Not only that, but they're caught in some crossfire between the Banished and UNSC forces, with technology about 30 years out of date, and I'm sure you can figure out what group these UNSC forces belong to. To make things even crazier, they noticed Covenant too. Not Banished, not some ex-Covenant group like Julam Dama's Covenant in Halo 4, the Covenant. It's kind of shocking at first, until you realize the last known location of the Covenant led by the Sanshayum was the Ark. And if there are those who still believe in the Great Journey like Castor does, there's bound to be others out there too. Not only that, but that figure standing atop the Lich on the cover art of the book looks a lot like a prelate, the genetically augmented Sanshayum super soldiers introduced in the short story from Fracture's Shadow of Intent. The premise of this book is outright crazy. The Covenant and the Spirit of Fire returning is huge for the Halo universe, and it's so shocking that the preview on the back of the book doesn't even hint towards either of those things. You might think the book's marketing is trying to avoid spoilers, but they're introduced so early that it couldn't be the case. Anyway, this book is the story of Lopez and the Spartan 3s trying to stop Castor from activating the array. Though there is a huge war going on in the background, the book stays focused on Veda, the Spartans, Castor, Gadagai, and the Prelate, with some cameos from Pavium and Voridus from Halo Wars 2's Awaken the Nightmare expansion. I really enjoyed this one, much more than Shadows of Reach in fact, both for how much it answers about the state of the galaxy, but also for being a story about the ferrets and Castor. It's hard to say whether you should read Last Light, Retribution, or Shadows of Reach before this one, because it's just so different. It's not a mystery anymore, and even though it follows Castor's plot from Shadows of Reach, it mainly follows the ferrets. Troy Denning basically wrote 2 trilogies here, the Blue Team trilogy and the Ferret trilogy. He took the villain from one, continued his story in the final entry of the other trilogy, then put him back in the other trilogy to continue again. It's a really strange choice, so keep those books in mind if you want to read this one for Castor. Plot-wise though, it basically just follows Shadows of Reach, with characters coming in from Last Light and Retribution. That said, I would say if you want to know more about the battle on the Ark, including the Covenant, the Ferrets, or Castor, read this. If you're not a fan of Troy Denning's slow-paced writing, I would say this is the fastest paced of his books, but it still has some of his signature walking speed pacing. I'm disappointed we're scheduled to get yet another book from him in 2023 in the form of Halo Outcasts, because we just got 2 trilogies from him in quick succession, and I could use a bit more of John Shirley, Matt Forbeck, Joe Staten, or Tobias S. Buckle before we return to the Ferrets again. And considering that the background villain's subplot from Halo Retribution has yet to be resolved in any Halo media, I'm willing to bet Troy Denning will be writing another book for the universe after Outcasts to tie up that loose end. Halo the Rubicon Protocol is the 4th Halo novel written by Kelly Gay, her first standalone story in the Halo universe. It takes place on Zeta Halo during and immediately following the opening cutscene of Halo Infinite, where the UNSC Infinity emerges from slipspace in front of Zeta Halo, attempting to launch its attack against Cortana, but is ambushed by the Banished. Infinity is effectively destroyed, while its crew are fighting off the attack, trying to escape the crashing ship. This story keeps its view on a small crew of support staff who made it off Infinity in a lifeboat, as well as Spartan 4's Nina Coven, Bonita Stone, and Thomas Horvath. The chapters of this book tell the story of these individuals, Spartans and humans, surviving on the ring while the UNSC is scattered, their equipment is compromised, and the Banished is in pursuit. Though it picks up right where Shadows of Reach left off with Infinity going to Zeta Halo, it does not follow any of the same characters or any other major characters we knew were on Infinity. So no info on Master Chief, Blue Team, Halsey, Lasky, Palmer, Locke, or Alpha 9. What we do get is a small team with the odds stacked against them, hoping that a larger force is out there to help them while they visit locations from Infinite's campaign and try to fight back against the Banished in whatever limited way they can. I really enjoyed the Rubicon protocol. The support crew has more than enough personality to carry the story, and the Spartans around them are really good at grounding the odds. It's the first time, in my opinion, that the Fours actually earn the name Spartans. They're fast, determined, smart, jump in right where they're needed, and most importantly, give you hope that humanity can succeed. But even with a couple Spartans around, the Banished are brutal. They torment this crew, kill and torture their friends, and will not stop until they know humanity is wiped off the ring. Though the book takes place 6 months before Halo Infinite's campaign, I think it's assumed you've already played it. It's not particularly graphic compared to the other novels, but the book can get pretty depressing. People like me may only be able to make it through while watching the date timestamps on the chapter starts creep from December 2560 towards the day you know Master Chief will return in May or June and fight back against Jaga, Escharum, Chaklock, and the Banished forces they lead as the antagonists of this book. So, I'd recommend this one generally to anyone looking for a story with tie-ins to Halo Infinite's campaign and a few of its audio logs. Kelly Gay's writing style is great. She tells a story about new, interesting characters, and the background characters are all ones from Infinite. It's probably the best starting point into the novels for people who are getting into them just because of Infinite. If you like deep lore, you get an appearance from Adjutant Veridity from Point of Light, which is cool, but not much, and you get the Banished's first meeting with the Harbinger and some scenes with her, but no real backstory beyond the vague rhetoric about revenge that she spews in the campaign. If that stuff sounds interesting to you, give this one a try, or at least listen to the audiobook excerpt posted on Halo's YouTube channel. So that's my goal completed. The current 30 Halo novels reviewed in order of release based on their appeal to a Halo fan. I hope I've informed some decisions about your reading order, and if not, just entertained you for a few minutes. I know I didn't mention it last video, though my favorites of these novels are probably Renegades, Envoy, First Strike, and Broken Circle, in that order, of which I enjoy each for different reasons. My least favorites are definitely Legacy of Onyx and Oblivion, and if I wasn't reading every novel, those two were easily skippable for me. I know Halo Outcasts and Halo Epitaph, two new standalone novels, are both scheduled to be released in the next year, but I think the press you can find on them as those books release will be enough to inform your decisions about if you should read them. I'm also very slowly reading through the Halo Encyclopedia in my spare time, and I could wait 2 or 3 more months to include a review of that in this video, but I think its appeal is self-evident. It's an encyclopedia for people who want the lore. There's also graphic novels, which I never really got into because they're expensive, the teen novels, and a cookbook. Again, those kind of have a different appeal, and because there are fewer of them, it's easier for a consumer to understand if they're the right choice for them compared to 30 different novels. So I don't think my opinions are needed as much there. With that, I'd be happy to answer any more questions in the comments. Enjoy your next read.